this is Kermit the Frog.
Fascinating.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Magic is always there.
Aye, sir.
As long as we keep looking for it.
Engage.
What does God need with a starship?
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
I protest. I am not a merry man.
Places, please. And here we go.
Down at Fraggle Rock.
Welcome, Doozers, Gorgs, Cations, and things to episode 141 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Jarman, and we're on a journey across the stars to compare and contrast the creative worlds of Jim Henson and Gene Roddenberry.
What started as reviews of The Muppet Show and Star Trek the original series has expanded into outer space.
And this week we have Fraggle Rock episode The Great Radish Famine, and Next Generation episode Time Squared. But before that, Steve, I think I want to rock.
Well, there are all kinds of gems, jewels, and geodes in this world, many of which can probably be found in Fraggle Rock. And this week's gem is Bloodstone.
Ooh.
Despite its name, the most desirable Bloodstone specimens are actually kind of a deep green and sometimes have red flecks in them. They're also known as heliotropes. They're found throughout antiquity. Pliny the Elder documented that bloodstones were used by magicians as stones of invisibility. Other ancients said it could be used to bring rain and solar eclipses, and the Romans and Greeks used it to ward off venomous creatures. But today, commercially, they're mostly used in cosmetics and medicine processing. So that's bloodstones, and that rocks.
That rocks.
What's going down in Fraggle Rock? What's up, Doc? Doc is trying to up his fuel economy in the old station wagon, charting incredible numbers. He goes to brag to Schimmelfinny, who calls him. But as Doc brags, Schimmelfinny reveals that he's been adding gas to Doc's gas tank this whole time. And Doc is pissed and is mad because he submitted a paper to the Tinkerers Union or something, and their friendship is over. Well, days go by. Doc misses his friend Schimmelfinny and does Sprocket. Doc debates calling him, but then gets a call from Ned first. Ned is going to come visit, but Doc has a shocking surprise for him, a hand buzzer. What's going down in Fraggle Rock? Margery the trash heap is having a nightmare in which Margery appears to herself in a dream to give herself advice. I thought that was great.
She's insane.
She laments that she can't bring the Gorgs and Fraggles and Doozers together, so she's going to use magic to teach them a lesson. A spell is cast and Margery takes all of the radishes from the garden. Well, Moki's writing in her diary when Boober comes by, is so thankful that she is not dead. When she asks, "Why would you think I was dead?" he says, "Well, there are no more radishes and you're the radish picker. So if there are no more radishes, I assume it's because you're dead."
Not because you forgot or were lazy. He's very passive aggressive.
Moki gets the hint and heads to the Gorg's garden, where Ma Gorg is trying to get her beauty cream prepared, but she needs radishes, but there aren't any. Junior starts to plant more radishes, and King Gorg lets him in on a secret. We get some lore here that Gorgs suffer from vanishing and turning invisible, and the cream that has to be made is what keeps them visible in this world. Moki writes in her diary once more that Fraggles everywhere are starving. Meanwhile, in the Gorg's garden, Pa, Ma, and Junior Gorg have started to turn invisible. Their heads start missing. Moki ventures to see Margery, but Margery is frustrated further that the Fraggles and the Gorgs and the Doozers just still don't get it. So she says, "You need to go get a Doozer and meet with a Gorg in the Gorg's garden tonight, or all is lost." So Moki goes and kidnaps a Doozer and heads to the garden to attempt to summon a Gorg. Margery, meanwhile, dreams of a world in harmony, and we get the song Perfect Harmony as she imagines the perfection in the meeting between the three groups, where in reality, Moki freaks out when she realizes Junior doesn't have a head, and everyone runs away screaming. Margery decides that was a success regardless.
She's insane.
The radishes. So this week I actually added a new part of my summary, and it's called "What Do Doozers Do?" Because for the first time, the Doozers were a real part of the plot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we get some Doozer lore on how radishes are ground up, become Doozer dust, which then is turned into Doozer sticks, which is what they use to make their constructions, which is why the Fraggles love them so much. We get a wicked, sweet Doozer musical number called Set Your Shoulder, a song about teamwork and grit and iron determination. But then this is when they realize there's a radish emergency. They go into a panic. It's the end of Doozerdom until they find a new focus, knitting. And then we get an awesome Doozer knitting song, at the end of which they realize that knitting won't fulfill them. They have to build. And they end up blaming the Fraggles for all of their woes. They immediately turn to mob mentality.
You.
While discussing their options, one of them is kidnapped by a Fraggle and dragged off. He finds himself in the Gorg's garden where Moki struggles to get the Gorg's attention, and he screams out and he yells at this friggin' Gorg to get down here. The Gorg comes out with no head. The Fraggle freaks out and runs away with him, and he is presumably returned home.
Hopefully.
So yeah, that's this week's episode of Fraggle Rock with a new section about what do Doozers do.
It's a whole different subplot. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It's the C plot we didn't know we needed.
But we sure did.
So Jeremy, what did you think of this week's episode of Fraggle Rock?
First of all, Doozer mustaches for the win.
Doozer mustaches, and I love all the implied facial features.
Yeah.
And how just with a few little changes, like they change the color of the nose. Some of them have glasses, some of them have little facial hair, but how they're able to take these little things and turn them
These
into
little tiny guys.
A community of things.
I know. We finally get some Doozer development here. One of the things I love too with the Gorgs was these little sweet moments between Junior and his parents. Sometimes he says the line, why are you always making radish youth and beauty cream? You're already beautiful. And he's like, says that to his mom. It's like, that's so sweet.
Aw, Junior.
And I love that we learn the radishes are like the lifeblood of this whole ecosystem of Gorgs, Fraggles, and Doozers. Like if they lose radishes, like everything falls apart. Like it's just, that's their economy. And we learned there was real magic, like last episode, I think, with the magic flute. And like the magic,
they've hinted and shown real magic a handful of times.
Yeah, in smaller ways, but now Trash Heap just lets loose. She has full on magical abilities. Like
yes, she does.
She teleports without moving all of the radishes down into her trash pile. Like, oh, it's like, okay, wow, okay, this is going a whole other level here, magic. So we got a lot of lore this episode, and I think I found that if you give me a Doozer heavy episode, I'm all in. Like that's all I want is more Doozers.
Oh man. And them having 2 musical numbers this week was just incredible.
Yes,
and Set Your Shoulder is one of the best from the show. So I'm glad we got to enjoy
Like you said, they're just so small and they put those little tiny features and their mouths move so expressionally.
And we got to see like a Doozer baby.
Yeah.
Or a Doozer toddler, maybe.
They're already so cute. And the little tinier one, like that's just adorable. So,
yeah, man.
This is like going to be part of the top of the season for me because it's just the Doozers are amazing.
Yeah, Doozers are amazing. And then you get all this lore.
Yeah.
In one episode for all 3 groups. So I just think that's a win.
Everything was covered, all the magic, and we saw all the characters. And it was just like, it was a full on good episode. I don't know.
Yeah, man.
I guess it was
Trashy music number, 2 Doozer music numbers.
Gobo, Wembley, and Red weren't really featured much, but that wasn't, it's okay. They're always featured, so it's okay.
That's true. And the guy who performed Gobo also plays Margery the Trash Heap, so it makes sense that Margery had such a heavy episode and Gobo just kind of had a break.
That makes sense. Yeah. I didn't realize they had the same voice or same person.
Yeah. Same thing with Philo and Gunge. They had heavier play, so the people that played them had less.
Okay, yeah.
This episode.
The 2 little companions of the Trash Heap. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I agree. This is probably going to have top 3 unless something really kicks it out.
But the weird thing, I even texted Steve after I watched it, was that there is no Uncle Traveling Matt this episode. They just like either forgot or just didn't have space for it, so it wasn't there. There was no postcard, so kind of strange.
Yeah, no postcard, no Gobo. He is off exploring the singing caves, I think is what they said.
Oh, I missed that.
No
okay.
Uncle Traveling Matt update this week. It was a throwaway line.
That makes sense. At least they put some line in there to explain it. That's good.
So, Jordan, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment this week?
I'm giving my first ever best Muppet design moment was basically just the individual doozers having such little tiny details, like you said, making each one different. That was my I'm changing it from the moment to basically the design of all of them, which is so impressive to me. That just kind of stood out. Like, oh, they're all individuals. They're so cute.
My answer is similar. I just wrote the doozers, finally individuals, interacting with each other, 2 musical numbers. Doozers can do no wrong.
Damn right they can't.
So that was my note for Best Puppeteer.
I like it.
So, Jarman, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation?
Today we have Time Squared. On the way to a mission, the Enterprise detects a random lone shuttle pod floating in space with no power or fuel. So they decide to tractor beam it in, and they find a duplicate of one of their own shuttle pods. It's exactly the same as one sitting right next to it. They're like, what the hell? Once they open it, they find another Picard inside, but he seems barely alive. He's not responsive. So both the duplicate Picard and the duplicate shuttle pod are resistant to healing and repairs, respectively. It seems they only respond to the opposite of whatever would be the proper treatment to bring them back to working order, which is very strange. Like, if he's given a stimulant, he falls asleep. If she gives him like a thing to put him down, he wakes back up. So Geordi and Data are finally able to bring the shuttle pod up and running, and they find that its chronometer, which is a thing, I guess, places it 6 hours ahead of what time it actually is, which insinuates that this Picard in the shuttle pod came from the near future and 6 hours in the future. So they're finally able to pull a video from the shuttle, and it shows this Picard abandoning the Enterprise in the shuttle, and then the Enterprise exploding in the view screen, killing everyone on board, leaving that Picard as the lone survivor. Meanwhile, in the sickbay, this other Picard is still incoherent, but Dr. Pulaski figures out that he's getting better as he gets closer to the time he was pulled from, and his mind is slowly getting back into sync with this reality, basically. And our Picard is pissed that any future version of himself would abandon the Enterprise, and he can't figure out why he would ever do that. So our Picard and the crew decide they shouldn't change their current course and just do exactly what they're going to do. They shouldn't change whatever outcome might happen. So they continue on their mission, but then they immediately encounter this energy vortex that they saw in the video from the future. And the vortex traps them, pulling them into its center, and they can only stay out by keeping it maximum warp for the entire time. So they send a probe out to study it, but the probe is immediately destroyed. And it appears the vortex is scanning them, but all scans are focused on Picard, and it shoots energy beams out at Picard. So this leads them to believe that the vortex has some intelligence behind it, and it wants Picard for some reason. So this makes them think that the future Picard must have left the Enterprise on the shuttle so that the Enterprise could escape, since it's only focused on him. Meanwhile, Picard's double has almost fully come back into sync, and he's able to talk now, and he insists that he fly out into the vortex again to let the Enterprise escape. But our Picard follows him to the shuttle bay and insists there must be another way because the last time he did the same thing and the Enterprise was destroyed. But future Picard insists, and he starts to get into the shuttle pod, and shockingly, our Picard just shoots him dead, just kills him. Not says a word, kills him. He says, the cycle must be broken. And then Dr. Pulaski and Miles O'Brien come to find this dead Picard and are shocked by Picard's utter brutality. After brutally murdering his other self, Picard goes back up to the bridge again and tells them to just go straight into the vortex, a move that he didn't discuss with anybody. Seems very dangerous, but it pays off. They safely make it through the vortex, and the dead Picard and his shuttle pod completely disappear off the Enterprise, and they're like, cool, that's all fine, and they just go on with their day. And that's the end of Time Squared. So, Steve, what do you think of this episode?
Okay, so some things I liked. Good intro. It seemed really mundane at first, like we've had it before, like derelict spaceship, let's go investigate, but then them finding the duplicate Picard was a good break from that.
Yeah.
I love the reveal that Captain Picard was time phased, but he was only time phased like 6 hours ahead. So whatever bad thing was going to happen soon, and that created great drive and tension.
That's true
for an already good tensioned episode. It was kind of cool to see Deanna and the Doctor representing like the two sides of Picard, the scientific analytic and the emotional vulnerable, and them kind of acting as the narrators for what was happening in his head. Was like a smart script writing kind of move. We got a reference to the Traveler when they were discussing all the different time travel ideas. That was cool. And I loved the appropriateness of the ending of because they even set it up when they were talking about kind of the time travel rules, where they're like, we have to keep acting like we're acting, and then at some pivotal moment when something is going to happen, we're going to have to act opposite from the way we would expect to act. Like, they set that up early, and it didn't make sense until this moment where Picard got to that moment and realized that he had to do the opposite of what his instincts were telling him, because his instincts were telling him and the old Picard to get on that shuttle and try again, and he had to break it. So like they really, the script was actually more cleverly written than I think I expected at the beginning.
I suppose so.
Some things I didn't like. The rules surrounding the time travel got too thick too quick. Like it was real weird that they sat and had like a time travel full discussion. Like that was a little odd.
Yeah.
Deanna Troi has met powerful beings of all sorts and aliens of unimaginable power and like other psychic types. And we have never seen her react with the like shuddering brokenness that she had when she was like trying to talk to Time Loop Picard.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was just weird. Of all these huge things we've seen her experience, this was her biggest reaction.
I could argue that she's so close to him, so it was hard to hear feeling him so distraught that he lost his whole crew, kind of thing. I don't know. That could be an argument for it, but.
And then I will admit that while the beginning of the episode was really well paced, there came a point about 3/4 of the way through where it felt like everyone, because of the way they set the deadline, it felt like everyone was sitting around waiting for the rest of the episode to happen. Like when they are literally like sitting, trying to figure out the next thing to do and like kind of sitting through those tense moments, it just slowed down.
They even said like, so what do we do now? Just sit and wait? And he's like, yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Like, and we got to sit and watch them do it. Mm-hmm. So those were maybe my struggles a little bit, but overall, well, not the most exciting episode and very, very very bottle episode. I thought it was a pretty good representation. Like, I think it did all right.
See, I felt it was very like great concept, but just really, I didn't think it was well written, especially for Picard's character. He seemed to act so out of character a lot of the time. He was very angry and ornery about his past self abandoning the Enterprise, not thinking like I feel like he normally would, where it's like, okay, there has to be some reason for this. Instead, he was just like, this is ridiculous. Blah, 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 blah. And then just shooting him dead when he could have easily just stunned him. That made no sense to me. I don't think they gave enough justification for him killing him. They even used the special effect when he uses the phaser. So you could tell as soon as it made contact, that wasn't a stun. It was like the kill setting. I'm like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Why? And I can't believe I didn't remember this ever happening, because they always talk about Janeway being the captain who's like the most brutal, and she just makes the most direct decisions, killing people when she doesn't really have to. But this is like a big one where it's like, you didn't have to kill that guy, and it was yourself. But there were some good Geordi, Data, Riker, and Worf moments throughout, where they kind of had some good character moments and things that made me laugh with their dialogue. But yeah, I don't know, just didn't hit for me. I just thought it was a really cool concept, but just not written well. I don't know. It's strange because it wasn't bad. It didn't hit me right. So towards the bottom for me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It won't be my bottom 3 probably, but it might be. We'll see.
Yeah, who knows? It could float down.
Because this is pretty good season, so not a lot of stinkers.
That's right.
But Steve, we got some Trek facts here. Originally, this was meant to be a 2-part story, with Q being the force behind the time anomaly. But elements of this were later pushed onto the All Good Things episode in 1994, which is fantastic. We'll get to that much later. During the filming, this is a pretty neat little fact. There's a writer, Ronald D. Moore, who's now gone on to huge success, and he basically spearheaded all of Deep Space Nine. But he was touring the set during the filming of this episode, and that's when he handed in his first script for Star Trek called The Bonding, which comes out in 1989, I think later this season or the next season. So it's kind of like his first introduction to Star Trek, where he became like a huge spearhead of all Star Trek stuff, and then Battlestar Galactica and all sorts of shows going forward. He was on for this episode. He was walking around while this was filming. Commander Riker hints at the strained relationship with his father in this episode, and this is explored in depth in the Icarus Factor coming up next week. where we'll meet his father, which is kind of neat. And Pulaski even has a surprise reaction in this episode where says, "Your father liked to cook?" And that's a hint at what is revealed in the next episode, where she apparently was an old girlfriend of Riker's father. So she's like, "I don't think he cooked for me." That's basically what she was saying.
So what you're telling me is that this is a classic two-parter.
Basically. I mean, Icarus Factor's coming right up. When Picard and Riker are theorizing how the Elbaz shuttle arrived to them from 6 hours in the future, they mention slingshot time travel. And this method is famously used by Captain Kirk many times, used in Naked Time, Tomorrow is Yesterday, Assignment Earth, and then in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, where they basically slingshot around the sun to get enough velocity to travel back in time to a specific
to capture
point.
some whales or whatever.
Yeah, capture some whales. So they mentioned that, like, oh, could it have used a slingshot method? And they're like, no, couldn't have done that. So they're basally referencing back to old Kirk and his shenanigans.
And that's when we got the reference to the Traveler, too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because they're trying to figure out how it possibly did this kind of thing. But Steve, what are our Trek connections this go around?
Okay, well, since this was a bottle episode, there were no guest stars or guest actors to really credit here. So I just pulled some goodies but oldies. Michael Dorn has provided multiple voices on Jim Henson's Dinosaurs, which we'll watch sometime in the future. And this was an interesting one. As a teen, Brent Spiner, I think, worked as a performer at a place called Astro World in Texas. Well, the special show at Astro World in Texas was the Pied Piper of Astro World, a show that happened a few times a day, where a performer dressed as the Pied Piper, who Brent Spiner played at one point, played opposite of Rufus, provided by Jim Henson's, one of Jim Henson's Muppets. Rufus is like kind of the floppy dog. You might remember him from the Muppet Valentine special.
I think I remember that.
He's like Mia Farrow's dog who leaves with her. But yeah, there was a performer that did the part of Rufus opposite of a live performer, and that was Brent Spiner for a while.
Oh, wow. What a
he worked with a Muppet at some point.
Very rad.
So yeah, there's some oldies but goodies for the core cast.
Yeah, we'll have to save more of those for other bottle episodes, of course.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was just worried about.
But these episodes were so similar, so it's easy to put these
makes
together.
Sense. Both of them feature people having to break their habits of going through the motions. Picard killing other Picard to stop the cycle of his own doing, and Moki following Margery's advice and bringing the Doozers to meet the Gorgs.
I got a similar one.
She had to break the cycle.
Yeah, both require characters to work together with someone they don't like or respect to complete a goal. So the Fraggles and Doozers to work with the Gorgs to figure out what happened with the radishes, and Picard having to work with his future self who he doesn't like or respect for abandoning the Enterprise. So kind of the same deal.
Basically. Both feature two advisors that are around a whole lot, but not the most helpful. Deanna Troi and Dr. Pulaski with Picard, and Philo and Gunge with Margery.
Yeah, somewhat helpful, but not really all the time. Both feature objects going through a portal of sorts. The Enterprise goes through the vortex at the end of the episode, and the radishes going through Margery's magic portal and ending up in the trash pile. That's very similar. Oh, God, but what's that noise? That one there.
Transporter malfunction. Transporter malfunction.
It's that time of the episode where we transport one character from one episode to the other and vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
This week, Trek to Rock, I'm going to bring over the second time-stuck Picard and replace Gobo, just laying somewhere in a cave catatonic and not really involved with the episode.
Until towards the end where he starts getting, what am I going to do?
That's right.
Trek to Rock, I'll have the two Picards come over to replace the Trash Heap's companions, Philo and Gunge. They'd be all serious and fighting with each other the whole time, and Margery with the Trash Heap would sing them a song to bring them together as friends.
Aw.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Rock to Trek, I'm going to bring over all the Doozers and just fill the Enterprise with them.
Yeah.
Because I would love it, instead of nanotech, there's just an army of little green men living in the consoles and walls, keeping the ship together.
That would be lovely. They can sing songs like they're the dwarves from Snow White, put things together.
Yeah, it's like every time Data has to get under a control panel to rewire something, there's just like three little green guys in there with hammers.
Tink, tink.
Excuse me.
Hello. Rock to Trek, I'd have the radishes come over to replace the Enterprise entirely. So then the
Just a
entire
pile of
ecosystem
radishes.
of the Federation would be built around radishes.
Oh, okay. I see.
That kind of works their
Instead of-
doozers. So if the doozers put together the
Instead of
Enterprise,
dilithium crystals or whatever.
Yeah,
it's
like-
all radishes.
and they need the doozers there to take care of the Enterprise radish construction. So that'd be great. I like it.
hmm
Oh, yeah, that's good times. I'm putting a flag in because there's a weird computer noise my computer made. All right. I think that's your outro. No, it's
That's
me.
your outro. It's
Oh.
always your outro.
You're right. Never mind. Forget it. But that brings us to the end of episode 141 of the MuppeTrek Podcast.
Join us next time for Fraggle Rock episode, The Garden Plot.
And Next Generation episode, The Icarus Factor.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.